What's up everyone, and thank you for stopping by the channel. Today's project is this Stihl trimmer, and the problem is that it's been sitting in a garage unused for several years and now it won't start. Let's take a good look at it, find out what's wrong with it, and hopefully we can fix it. In this video, we try and repair this trimmer. However, it may not be the exact repair you need to make to yours. We'll explore other options later in the video. Many people consider Stihl equipment to be extremely well built and some of the best in the market. It's well worth its high asking price. So repairing this trimmer makes sense because replacing it would cost a lot of money. Now, the filter and filter cover are missing, but the cost of replacement parts are quite inexpensive even on a high-end trimmer like this. The first thing I want to do is put some fuel into the tank, prime the carburetor, and try starting it. So our first major problem is that the primer bulb is not filling up with fuel, so the chance of getting this trimmer started is practically zero. Well, I'm still going to try and start it just to prove my point. The next thing I want to try is to physically put some fuel into the carburetor's throat and try starting it. Now this may actually clear the carburetor out and get it working again. Unfortunately, that didn't work, so now I'm curious if maybe the engine might be too worn out to run properly. To figure this out, I'm going to use a compression tester to see how worn out the engine is. If the number is under 50 psi, it may be tough to start. So I'd like to see a number over 50, and the higher the better. Just screw it into the spark plug hole and then pull the rope a few times. The compression reading is about 47 psi, so the engine is a bit worn out and will be down on power, but I think it's still worth fixing. The next thing I want to do is remove the carburetor and examine it. Now, rebuilding the engine is a possibility, but I want to get it running first if we can. That way we can find out if there's any other problems. Now, you could slide the carburetor off the engine without removing the engine cover, but you'd have to literally smash the primer bulb flat to do it. It's a bit tricky to do, so I'd rather just remove the engine cover instead. I'll start by taking apart the pump side of the carburetor. What we're looking for is that the pumping diaphragm is in working condition. Check to make sure that these two check valve flaps are flat and parallel with the rest of the diaphragm. The easiest way is to look at it from the side, and ours looks to be fine and in working condition. Now, if yours is not parallel, then you might consider just replacing the carburetor instead. The next thing I'm going to look at is the primer side, which in this case happens to be the metering side as well. Now, the primer bulb looks very discolored, but it's not cracked. However, since I'm here, I'll replace it when we put it back together. So here's the metering diaphragm, and it controls the fuel flow through the carburetor, but it doesn't look very good. It's supposed to be very flexible like a cotton cloth, however this one is very petrified, so it needs to be replaced. Before replacing the diaphragm, we need to fill the inlet screen with some fuel and check that it flows through it. After filling the screen, press the rocker arm on the other side, and hopefully the fuel will disappear from the screen pocket. Well, it flowed through the screen, but it was a little slower than expected. I want to try that again and see if it's consistent. Okay, this time it went through the screen and it was much faster, so it looks like it just needed some fuel flowing through it to get it back to normal. Everything seems to be working like it should, so I'll put everything back together. If you're uncomfortable doing this type of work on your carburetor, then consider replacing it. Try searching for Stihl carburetor on some online stores and check the listing description for your model number. I try not to name any of the online stores because I'm not sponsored by any of them. Some people ask me why I don't just replace the original carburetor to begin with, and it's because saving the original high quality one is always better than replacing it with an unbranded knockoff. Now, before I put the carburetor back on the engine, I want to connect the fuel line and press the primer bulb a few times. I want to make sure it's working like it's supposed to, and if it doesn't, then I'll order a new carburetor. Now, it seems to be working, and it looks like some of the gas is dissolving some of the gummy old gas in the fuel lines and the filter too. After making sure that the fuel is flowing through the carburetor, slide it back onto the studs, reconnect the return line, and of course the throttle cable. Now make sure that you test that the throttle cable is working like it's supposed to before you put the air filter assembly back on. Another reason why your trimmer might not be starting is that the compression is way too low. If the engine is damaged by running straight gas through it, then the rings in the cylinder walls will be so badly damaged that it will simply not start. Now I'm going to start the trimmer without the air filter on just so you can see the choke working. Also, if I need to manually prime it with fuel, it'll be a whole lot easier. So it only runs on choke and dies when off of choke. That means we need to turn out the adjustment screw to deliver more fuel to the engine. Luckily, we don't need to use a special tool to turn it. I'll start by turning it counterclockwise a half turn just to see if we can get it to idle off of choke. So unfortunately, it still doesn't want to idle, but instead of making another slight fuel adjustment, I'm going to turn the idle screw in just a bit and see if we can get it to idle. Now, if it starts and the idle is too fast, we'll just back it down. Well, it sounds great and the trimmer head seems to be working like it's supposed to. Now, it's always a gamble putting time and money into repair only to find out that the other half of the equipment isn't working. Now, to keep this from happening in the future, always empty the gas tank and run it dry before putting it up. So my question is, how much longer would you guess this trimmer's gonna last? By my guess, it's had a hard life, but I'm hoping that it's gonna last at least 3 more seasons. Would you agree with me, or am I just being too hopeful? Thank you for watching. I really appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask any questions, and I hope to see you in my next video.